we're going to deal with a cat that may be one of, if not the most, influential jazz pianist of, say, the 50s, 60s. Influencing Herbie Hancock, Chick Corea, Brad Mehldau, so many others. All the modern pianists are influenced by this guy. He was born in Plainfield, New Jersey, and grew up in Somerville, not too far away, after this parent split. I graduated from North Plainfield High School, where he was given a scholarship to Southeastern Louisiana University as a flute player. Yeah, he was a flute player, flute and piccolo. And not only was he a standout as a flute player and piccolo player at Southeastern Louisiana University, he was also the star quarterback on the football team and led them to a conference championship as the starting quarterback. That's right, Bill Evans. He did, however, complete his degree at Southeastern as a piano major and composition as his minor. So somewhere he went from marching in the marching band on flute and piccolo and throwing footballs and running and passing for a state championship in football to becoming this more introverted classical pianist and theoretician. He always had an ear for the music of the era. People like Bud Powell, and he even met Thelonious Monk at some point after his collegiate days, probably when he was at the Mann School of Music doing his postgraduate work. We met Thelonious Monk and got steeped in the bebop style of jazz, but because of his extensive classical background, owing to the fact that his mother gave him classical piano lessons as a kid, and the same for his older brother, he was very steeped in the music of Ravel and Debussy, and he brought that harmonically, melodically, impressionistic type of classical training to his jazz, which most certainly stood in great contrast to what was the more aggressive bebop style. So he is kind of a transitional pianist. He and a friend, I think Mundell Lowe, had a little group together, a duet, guitar and piano, and tried to do some work around New York, and it wasn't working, and so they moved to a smaller area in the Midwest. Somehow, I think Detroit area somewhere, they got hooked up with some other musicians who formed a backup band for Billie Holiday. This band would have included the great Frank Rosolino on trombone as well. And so here is the young Bill Evans touring around with Lady Day herself. And so now he is really getting baptized in the jazz world, so to speak. And of course, she is stationed in New York, and so he's now back in New York. And during the second round of stays and gigs and whatnot in New York, he meets Gil Evans and George Russell at Mann School, helped him with modality and more modern harmonic theory. And that, coupled with the work of Ravel and Debussy and Stravinsky and others, kind of informed a real different jazz approach. He later meets Miles Davis, And Miles is searching at that time, and he likes what he hears from this young Bill Evans. And of course, Bill Evans is on his own journey, and so although they intersect, they divide again, and in this time, Bill discovers a young Scott LaFaro in an audition for someone else's band, but he remembered Scott, and 3 years later, he would be reuniting with Scott. But first, he has work to do. And that work is, he's doing a lot of different things, a lot of different gigs, developing his style, and then he is tapped for a second time to join Miles Davis and in a pivotal recording session of Modal Jazz, the best-selling jazz album of all time, Kind of Blue. And that really brought the work of Bill Evans to a much wider audience. So after being on the road with Billie Holiday for a while and ending up back in New York, Bill is doing gigs in and around the city, and has a second encounter with Miles Davis, which led to the recording of the pivotal Kind of Blue album, the best-selling jazz album of all time. That brought Bill's work to the attention of a much wider audience, will certainly raise his talk to a higher level among the jazz community, and made him kind of a overnight celebrity. Bill did feel restricted in this larger ensemble. It was a sextet, and he preferred to work with a little bit more freedom in the confines of a jazz trio, which he did. He remembered the young Scott LaFaro. He reconnected with him, and that partnership, along with various drummers at the time, created the Bill Evans trios that did such great work. By the way, along the way, Bill did some time in the Army, and he performed as a flute player and a piano player, and a piccolo player, as a matter of fact. I think the 3rd Army Band based in the Chicago area. It is in this time that he wrote his very famous and signature piece, Waltz for Debbie. So that is the era that piece comes from. Well, that became one of his signature pieces when he was working with Scott LaFaro after the recording of Kind of Blue. Scott had an unfortunate car accident, lost his life while driving in upstate New York, and I think he was eventually replaced by Eddie Gomez, and a few other drummers came into the mix as well, and that was the second iteration of the Bill Evans trio settings. Bill continued to do great work primarily as a pianist and composer. He is probably the most influential pianist of this era. I'd say by far the most influential pianist for most pianists from this particular era. We remember his light touch, his classical sensitivities, his modal approach to improvisation, and just all of the wonderful work he did as a composer and as a great jazz pianist. He did have some issues with drug dependency, and those did hasten his demise, and so a brilliant life is cut short with the dependencies, but that does not take away from the fact that this man was a very passionate musician, a well-studied, well-trained musician who believed that all jazz pianists should have a strong technical background and should be well immersed in the work of the classical pianist. We owe a lot that we listen to in the works of modern jazz pianists to the work of Bill Evans in the 50s and the 60s and beyond. So thank you, Bill, for exploring new territories and making a fresh approach to jazz piano. Thank you very much. That is my story, and I'm sticking to it.